Sequels and entertainment. You can bet your boots that if something is popular and financially successful, a sequel is almost a foregone conclusion. Whether it was in literature, specifically the Hardy Boys and their 2,357 sequels, movies such as Rocky or Superman, and even video games such as Ms. Pac-Man. Today, though, we are talking about a sequel to one of the biggest successes of the 1980s. This sequel will take everything that was great about the original and crank it up a notch to provide another piece of stunning entertainment. No, I'm not talking about Breaking 2 Electric Boogaloo. I'm talking about the follow-up to Techno's original groundbreaking game, Double Dragon 2: The Revenge. What movie inspired the design of this game? So crack those knuckles and get ready to sweep the leg, because this is the history of Double Dragon 2: The Revenge. The year is 1988, and Techno's designer Yoshihisa Kishimoto has been assigned to create a follow-up to his groundbreaking smash hit Double Dragon. Not only did Mr. Kishimoto smash his way through the beat-em-up genre, but also around the squared circle as he created the best arcade wrestling game of all time, WWF WrestleFest. Double Dragon was released the previous year, and it wasn't just a financial success, but it also helped define the beat-em-up genre that we all know and love today. When designing the original arcade game, Mr. Kishimoto was influenced by the movie The Warriors and also Bruce Lee, whom he was a huge fan of. So much so that he gave Billy and Jimmy the last name of Lee. One other note, Bruce Lee's nickname was Little Dragon. Upon designing the look and feel of the sequel, he decided to go with a newer movie as an influence, and that would be The Road Warrior. Since the movie was a bit darker in tone, his game design followed suit with the murder of Marion, who was shot down in cold blood by the Black Warriors. While the original arcade game attained great success, it was not without its flaws, especially the horrendous slowdown in certain areas. Thankfully, this was fixed in the sequel. Mr. Kishimoto always liked innovating his games, and this one was absolutely no different, especially when it came to the controls. He decided to use the same control scheme found in his earlier arcade game, Renegade. Double Dragon 2 was released in 1988 by Technos. Everything that made the first game extremely popular is back, starting with the simultaneous two-player action. The game opens up with Marion being shot and killed by Slick Willie, the leader of the Black Warriors gang. So it's up to you and your brother to hunt them down and avenge her death. Right off the bat, the first thing you will notice is that the controls have been changed to directional-based attacks, depending on which way you are facing. The left button always attacks to the left, and the right button always attacks to the right. Considering how successful the first Double Dragon was, this was one area that did not need improving or innovating, in my opinion. Personally, I think Mr. Kishimoto had a brain fart when it came to changing the controls. It's still fun to play, and after a little bit of practice, it does get easier. The moves are very similar to the first one, but with a couple of new ones added in, such as a flying hurricane kick. In regards to the gameplay, this feels like a beefier version of the original, only running a whole lot better. The influence of the movie The Road Warrior really shines through, especially with the first boss, who looks very similar to the final boss of the movie. Most of the enemies from the first game return, but have been given a bit of a makeover, including a Bobo, who looks 10 years younger after apparently getting on the Rogaine. Looking good, buddy. Not only do the enemies get a fresh coat of paint, but the weapons have been upgraded as well, including shovels and hand grenades. The level structure is similar to the first game, taking place across 4 stages. The stages include an airport, lumber house, a field, and finally the headquarters of the Black Warrior gang. This game definitely takes a more supernatural tone, with the first boss simply disappearing after you defeat him, and then ultimately the final boss of the game. Since your girlfriend Marion has been killed, you have nothing to fight with your brother over, so instead you fight a shadow version of yourself. Supernatural indeed. Binary Design were in charge of the home computer conversions once again, and all in all they turned out pretty good, unlike the horrendous home ports of the first game. But to be honest, I could fart in my hat and it would turn out a whole lot better.
The best action game ever from Acclaim.
Let's start off by taking a look at the one most people are familiar with, and that's the NES version. This game was so popular upon its release in America that it quickly sold over 1 million copies. Upon starting up the game, the beloved 2-player mode that was sorely missing in the first entry on the NES makes its triumphant return. Continuing the tradition of the first NES game, this one expands upon the arcade sequel, giving it much more depth. Various cutscenes unfold and do a great job of telling the story. Some of the moves have been changed, including the removal of the elbow and the spin kick. There are a couple of new attacks once you get your opponent in a grapple, such as an elbow smash and a powerful jumping kick. There are also a lot more platform elements this time around. The level design is much more varied, going from a military base to rooftops to fighting inside of a helicopter. Eventually, you will be transported to another dimension where you have to fight the mysterious warrior in the final battle. If you defeat him, an angel will descend from heaven and revive Marion. Thankfully, there is no slowdown, but there is a bit of flicker in the 2-player mode. They added a couple of different game modes, including Mode A, where you cannot do damage to the other player, and Mode B, where you can. As for the overall feel, everything is nice and tight.
That's what she said.
Let's take a look at the port that was released only in Japan, and that would be the PC Engine version. This was released on the Super CD format and is actually based upon the NES game as opposed to the arcade original. 2-player simultaneous co-op is also on tap, just like the NES game. Thanks to the huge storage space provided by the CD format, the cutscenes have been redrawn and are now animated. This works really well, and although everything is in Japanese, you really get a feel for the story. Although the gameplay is essentially the same as the NES version, the graphics have been redone and look fantastic. Sprites are nice and large with smooth animation for each of the characters. Thanks to the more powerful NEC hardware, the graphics look more like a combination of the arcade original and the NES Classic. The sound effects and music are extremely good, with bone-crunching sound effects and heart-pounding techno music. The controls are nice and responsive, and any beat-em-up fan will feel right at home. It's just too bad this did not come out here in the States, because I would have loved to have played it back in the day. Switching over to the 8-bit computer releases, let's take a look at the Amstrad version. This is nuts and twigs above the original version in just about every department. Control-wise, we are dealing with only one fire button, so as usual when it comes to the computer ports, sacrifices had to be made. The graphics were converted from the arcade game down to the Atari ST, and then down even lower to the Amstrad, but they look really good, especially considering the hardware. The sprites are nice and large, although the animation is just a bit choppy. The speed of the game is fairly good, running about 80 to 85% of its arcade big brother. The controls feel good, although an extra couple of fire buttons would have helped immensely. This is about as good as it can get on the humble Amstrad hardware. If you absolutely love the top and bottom black borders on your spiffy new widescreen HD TV, then be sure and check out the 48K version of Double Dragon 2 on the Spectrum. Due to the lower memory limitations, a tiny strip of screen shows the action and everything feels claustrophobic. Also completely missing from this version are the bosses, and there are only 2 types of bad guys to fight. The loading times on cassette are really bad as well, with the action breaking up multiple times on each level. To be fair, what is there of the graphics are nicely detailed and the speed of the game is very fast. The AI, on the other hand, is not very good. The 128K version improves the loading times and restores the bosses, but for some odd reason puts them at the middle of the stage instead of at the end. Also restored to its former glory is the full screen experience with hardly any slowdown in sight. Although it may just be in monochrome, it is a much better port than the original game, which was a turd of a conversion. Let's switch back over to a Nintendo system with a Game Boy release. Although the artwork is from Double Dragon 3, the game is nothing like number 2 or number 3. Unfortunately, it's just a reskin of one of Tecno's Japanese Kunio-kun titles similar to what they did with the original Renegade. The controls are pretty straightforward with various punches and kicks at your disposal, including a super uppercut which knocks enemies all the way across the screen. Enemies will attack you with weapons and you are able to knock them out of their hands, but you cannot pick them up. There is simultaneous 2-player action thanks to the link cable. The gameplay isn't too bad, but since it was based on a different game, it doesn't quite feel like Double Dragon. The Atari ST version is up next, and it looks very close to the arcade original. The sprites are large and detailed, and the speed runs along at a quick pace. Considering how dreadful the conversions of the first game turned out, hopes were not high when this was released, but thankfully they did a great job. Yes, we only have one fire button, but everything from the arcade game has been retained aside from the opening animation of Marion getting shot. The sound effects and music are very good, although not quite as good as the Amiga port. Overall, though, a stellar conversion for the 16-bit Atari. The MS-DOS version is available in CGA, EGA, and VGA modes, and looks-wise it competes quite nicely with the Atari ST and Amiga versions. Speed-wise, the game is very fast with nice responsive controls despite only having one fire button. The simultaneous 2-player mode has also been retained. As for the sound, you guessed it. Since this is an early MS-DOS title, all we get are the usual farts and queefs of the internal speaker. If you loved Double Dragon 2 on the Spectrum but felt it was just way too advanced, then be sure to check out the MSX version. This is essentially the slower, choppier, crappier version of the 48K Spectrum port. which means you don't even get to experience the game in full screen. The controls are adequate and it does run along at a decent pace. There is also music while you play, which is always a big plus. The good old Commodore 64 version is up next, and compared to the first game, this one is a masterpiece. The sprites are large and detailed and easily recognizable from the arcade original. The animation is pretty smooth along with the gameplay itself. The hit detection though is not so great, with your punches and kicks seemingly going through the characters from time to time. Most of the arcade experience has been transferred over from the weapons to the elevators and everything looks great. Not as good as the Amstrad version, but the animation and speed of the gameplay on the Commodore is a whole lot better. There is even music while we play and even some digitized speech at the end of the game. Now let's take a look at the best 16-bit home computer port, and that is the Amiga version. For starters, the play area is full screen now with nary a black border in sight. The backgrounds along with the sprites appear to have been ripped straight from the arcade game and they look fantastic. The animation is nice and smooth and the speed of the game is darn near perfect. We get both excellent music and digitized sound effects at the same time, and yes, it sounds great. The only hindrance is the one-button controls, but overall it feels like the arcade version of Double Dragon 2. This was one of my favorite arcade conversions on the Amiga back in the day. The Mega Drive version was released only in Japan, and overall it just doesn't quite compete with the original conversion of the arcade game. All of the sprites have been scaled down quite a bit and there's an obvious lack of color going on. We also get a wonderful black border at the bottom of the screen, which is supposed to help with the speed of the game, but it just doesn't work. Everything about the speed of the gameplay is just a bit off, as if there's a lag between button presses. The music and sound effects are nice, with some of the grunts and groans taken straight from the arcade game. The level layout is very close to the arcade original. We even get the opening animation where Marion gets shot, which a lot of these conversions didn't have. It's a pretty good port despite its flaws, and I would have been more than happy to play this on my Genesis back in the day. In 2015, Double Dragon Trilogy was released on Steam. This is a collection of the original 3 arcade games with a couple of different modes added in. There is an option for original music, or you can listen to a remixed version. Simultaneous local 2-player and online co-op is available. There are 3 difficulty levels to choose from, so even the babies out there watching this video now have a chance to defeat the Black Warriors. At the time of this recording, the price is 60% off on Steam, so for $6 it's not too bad of a deal. The original arcade game is also available on the PS4 and Nintendo Switch. And finally, believe it or not, there is even a Tiger handheld version of the game, but to be honest, I've never played it. Here is a quick look at the commercial just for you.
Tiger puts arcade action in the palm of your hand. Games like Double Dragon 2. Billy Lee returns as you use your incredible ninja acrobatics to fight your way through 9 missions to defeat the ultimate villain, the Black Shadow Boss. Also available, Ninja Gaiden, Outrun, Paperboy, and Vindicators. Tiger LCD video games. Video excitement in the palm of your hand.
Double Dragon 2 The Revenge was a fantastic update to the original with one glaring exception, and that would be the controls. Everything from the original arcade game has been cranked up to 11 and it looks great. If you are a fan of beat-em-ups and also have a friend, be sure and check this one out. But even if you don't have any friends, the game is still fun to play in solo mode, so be sure and give it a shot. You'll be glad you did. If you like this video, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Also, if you'd like to support me on Patreon, be sure and click the link below. Thank you for watching.